The notification sound from my dad's phone cut through our Sunday dinner conversation like a knife. He glanced down at the screen, and for just 3 seconds, I saw everything that would shatter my world. Bank of America mobile alert. Transfer complete. $120,000 to Eileen Cabrera. Memo line, house down payment, our gift. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My sister Eileen was sitting right across from me, casually cutting her roast beef, completely unaware that I'd just discovered the biggest lie my family had ever told me. My name is Bernice Childers. I'm 32 years old and I've been a registered nurse at Portland General Hospital for 8 years. I drive a 7-year-old Honda Civic, live in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, and I've saved every penny I could for the past 4 years trying to buy my first home. Last month, I finally worked up the courage to ask my parents for help with a down payment, $15,000. That's all I needed to qualify for a small starter home in a decent neighborhood. My father, Russell Smith, had looked at me across this very same dining room table and said, "Bernice, you're 32 years old. You need to learn to be independent. We can't keep bailing you out." Bailing me out. I'd never asked them for money before in my entire adult life. My mother, Johnny Beatrice, had nodded in agreement. "Sweetheart, you're so capable. You don't need our help like Eileen does. You'll figure it out on your own." But apparently, while they were teaching me about independence, they were writing my 28-year-old sister a check for $120,000. I set my fork down carefully, my hands trembling slightly. The room felt like it was tilting. 8 times. They had given Eileen 8 times what I'd asked for, and they'd done it in secret while lecturing me about self-reliance. "Everything okay, honey?" my mom asked, noticing my sudden stillness. I looked at Eileen, who was scrolling through her phone, probably posting pictures of the new 4-bedroom colonial she'd just bought in the suburbs. The house she'd been bragging about for weeks, telling everyone how she'd saved up for such an amazing down payment. "I'm fine," I managed to say, though nothing would ever be fine again. That night, I took a screenshot of my dad's phone when he left it on the counter. The evidence was right there in black and white. Transfer complete, $120,000. Our gift. They'd taught me to be independent, all right. And I was about to show them exactly what independence looked like. If this story moves you, or if you've ever experienced the sting of family favoritism, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Your support means everything as I share my truth. And trust me, you won't believe what happens next. The $120,000 revelation wasn't an anomaly. It was the culmination of 32 years of systematic favoritism that I'd somehow convinced myself was normal. Let me take you back to when I turned 16. My parents threw me a small family dinner at home. Chocolate cake from the grocery store, a few relatives, and a used car they'd found on Craigslist for $3,000. "It's practical," my dad had said, "perfect for a responsible girl like you." When Eileen turned 16 2 years later, they rented out the entire back room of Romano's Italian restaurant. 50 guests, a DJ, a professional photographer, and a brand new white Volkswagen Beetle with a giant red bow. The party cost more than my first year of college tuition. I know because I heard my mom on the phone with my aunt laughing about how they'd gone a little overboard with $8,000 in party expenses. "Eileen only turned 16 once," my mother had said when I asked why the difference. "She's more social than you. She needs these memories." Apparently, I didn't need memories. I just needed to be practical. The pattern continued through high school. Eileen got designer clothes for school pictures while I shopped at thrift stores. She got a professional SAT tutor while I checked out prep books from the library. When she wanted to take art classes at the community center, my parents enrolled her immediately. When I asked to join the debate team, they said the travel costs were too expensive. But it was college where the favoritism became impossible to ignore. I'd worked 2 jobs throughout high school, saving every dollar for my education. I'd researched scholarships, applied for grants, and chosen nursing specifically because it was a stable career path that would guarantee employment. I was accepted to the state university's nursing program with partial academic scholarships, but I still needed help with the remaining costs. "We're proud of you for being so responsible," my father had said. "Taking out student loans will teach you the value of your education." So I worked 25 hours a week at a campus coffee shop while carrying a full course load. I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I wore scrubs from the thrift store and walked everywhere to save on gas money. I graduated with $42,000 in student loan debt, but I'd done it. I was independent, just like they wanted. Eileen, meanwhile, had decided she wanted to pursue fine arts at a private college 3 states away. The tuition was $45,000 per year. Without hesitation, my parents wrote the checks. "Eileen is creative and sensitive," my mother explained when I asked how they could afford it. "She needs more support than you do. Art school is expensive, but her talent is worth investing in." I have the bank records now, 4 years of tuition payments totaling $180,000, plus room and board, art supplies, and a monthly allowance of $800 so she could focus on her studies without worrying about work. While I was eating ramen and working nights, Eileen was studying abroad in Italy, funded entirely by our parents. After graduation, the pattern only intensified. I started working at Portland General, paying off my loans aggressively while living in a tiny studio apartment. I was proud of my independence, even if it was lonely. Eileen moved back home after college and announced she wanted to open an art boutique. She had no business experience, no business plan, and no money. What she had were parents who believed in her dreams. They gave her $50,000 to start Eileen's Gallery and Gifts. Prime location downtown, professional interior design, high-end inventory. I remember the grand opening party, another elaborate affair with catered food and local news coverage. The boutique lasted 18 months. When it failed, my parents didn't ask Eileen to pay back the $50,000. Instead, they comforted her, telling her she was ahead of her time and that the local market wasn't ready for her vision. Around the same time, I'd been promoted to charge nurse, a significant achievement that came with additional responsibilities and better pay. When I called to share the news, my father's response was lukewarm. "That's nice, honey. Very safe and stable. Though I sometimes wonder if you're not thinking too small. Eileen has such big dreams." Big dreams funded by their bank account. The text messages I've saved tell the whole story. Screenshots of conversations where my mother gushes about Eileen's artistic soul and free spirit, while describing me as practical and low maintenance. Messages where my father worries about Eileen's delicate nature, while praising my ability to handle anything life throws at you. Being strong became my prison. Being capable became my punishment. When Eileen decided she wanted to try photography, they bought her a $5,000 camera setup. When I mentioned I was interested in getting my master's degree in nursing, they suggested I look into student loans again. When Eileen's car broke down, they bought her a new one. When my Honda needed major repairs, they recommended a good mechanic and wished me luck with the expense. When Eileen went through a bad breakup, they paid for her to spend a month in California healing and finding herself. When I went through my own difficult divorce, they told me I was strong enough to get through it on my own. The most painful part wasn't even the money. It was the narrative they'd created about who we were. Eileen was the dreamer, the artist, the one who needed protection and support. I was the rock, the responsible one, the daughter who didn't need anything from anyone. "Bernice, you've always been the strong one," my father would say whenever I hinted that I might need help. "You'll figure it out." And I always did figure it out. I figured out how to pay for college, how to build a career, how to survive on my own. I figured out how to smile and nod when they praised Eileen's latest expensive hobby while dismissing my achievements as expected. What I hadn't figured out was that being strong didn't mean I had to be invisible. Being capable didn't mean I deserved less love, less support, less investment in my future. But that Sunday dinner, staring at that $120,000 transfer, I finally understood something crucial. They hadn't been teaching me independence. They'd been teaching me that I didn't matter as much as my sister, and I was done learning that lesson. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bank transfer notification, $120,000. The number burned behind my eyelids like a neon sign, flashing over and over until I finally gave up on rest and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. I needed to see it all laid out. I needed to understand the full scope of what had been happening to me my entire life. I opened a spreadsheet and started typing. Every memory, every gift, every financial advantage Eileen had received while I was told to be independent. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined. 16th birthday party, $8,000 for Eileen, $0 for me. Cars, $15,000 for Eileen's new Beetle, $3,000 for my used Honda. College tuition, $180,000 for Eileen's private art school, $0 for my state university education. Monthly allowances during college, $800 per month for 4 years, meant $38,400 for Eileen, $0 for me. Art boutique startup, $50,000 for Eileen, $0 business support for me. Photography equipment, $5,000 for Eileen, $0 for my professional development. Car replacement, $22,000 for Eileen's new sedan, $0 when I needed repairs. California healing trip, $4,000 for Eileen, $0 for my divorce recovery. And now, the house down payment, $120,000 for Eileen, $0 for me. The total made me physically sick. $442,400 invested in Eileen over 15 years. $0 invested in me. Nearly $500,000. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. My parents had spent almost $500,000 on one daughter, while telling the other daughter she needed to learn independence. The memory of last month's conversation came flooding back with brutal clarity. I'd been so nervous asking for help, rehearsing my words for weeks before finally working up the courage to bring it up during Sunday dinner. "Mom, Dad, I've been looking at houses." I'd started carefully. "I've saved up most of what I need for a down payment, but I'm about $15,000 short. I was wondering if you might be able to help me out with a loan. I'd pay you back with interest, of course." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. My father had set down his fork and looked at me with what I now recognized as disappointment. "Bernice, you're 32 years old," he'd said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of gentle condescension. "You need to learn to be independent. We can't keep bailing you out." Bailing me out. As if I'd been asking for money my entire life instead of working 2 jobs through college and paying off my student loans ahead of schedule. "But Dad," I tried to explain, "I've never asked for help before. This would just be a loan to help me get started." "Sweetheart," my mother had interrupted, reaching across the table to pat my hand like I was a child. "You're so capable. You don't need our help like Eileen does. You'll figure it out on your own. You always do." The conversation had ended there. I'd driven home feeling ashamed for even asking, convinced that I was being too dependent, too needy. I'd spent weeks questioning myself, wondering if I really was asking for too much. Now, staring at my spreadsheet, I understood the truth. They had $442,000 to give away. But I was too dependent for asking for $15,000. They had $120,000 sitting in their account, ready to hand over to Eileen without her even asking. But I was being unreasonable for requesting a loan. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent my entire adult life believing their narrative about my strength and independence, never questioning why strength meant I deserved less love, less support, less investment in my future. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for them. "They're just trying to help Eileen find her way," I'd tell myself. "They know I can handle things on my own." I'd worn their neglect like a badge of honor, proud of my self-sufficiency while secretly wondering why I always felt so alone. But this wasn't about helping Eileen find her way. This was about a fundamental difference in how they valued their daughters. Eileen was worth investing in. I was expected to invest in myself. Eileen deserved dreams funded by their bank account. I deserved the character-building experience of struggle. Eileen needed protection from life's difficulties. I needed to learn independence through hardship. The pattern was so clear now that I couldn't believe I'd missed it for so long. Every time I'd succeeded despite their lack of support, it had only reinforced their belief that I didn't need help. Every time Eileen had failed despite their generous funding, it had only convinced them she needed more support. I was trapped in a cycle where my competence was used as justification for my neglect. Sitting there at 3 a.m, surrounded by the evidence of 32 years of systematic favoritism, I felt something shift inside me. The guilt I'd carried for asking for help evaporated, replaced by something harder and more determined. They'd taught me to be independent, all right. They'd taught me that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself, that I had to fight for everything I wanted, that strength meant suffering in silence. But they'd made one crucial mistake in their education. They'd assumed that independence meant I would always accept their treatment without question. They'd assumed that being strong meant I would never fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my laptop and started researching something I never thought I'd consider. The research started innocently enough. I told myself I was just curious about my parents' financial situation. After all, if they could casually hand over $120,000 to Eileen, they must be doing pretty well, right? Public records are surprisingly easy to access when you know where to look. A few clicks on the county assessor's website, and I had everything I needed to know about my childhood home on Maple Street. Purchase price in 1998, $160,000. Current assessed value, $320,000. Current mortgage balance, $182,000. Monthly payment, $2,400. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. They still owed $182,000 on a house they'd owned for 25 years. That meant they'd refinanced, probably multiple times, pulling equity out of the house to fund their lifestyle, to fund Eileen's lifestyle. But here's what really caught my attention. The payment history showed they'd been late on their mortgage 3 times in the past year. Not drastically late, but 30 days behind schedule. That was unusual for people who'd always prided themselves on financial responsibility. I dug deeper, cross-referencing public records with online databases. Their property taxes had been paid late twice. They'd taken out a home equity line of credit for $75,000 just 2 years ago. The picture that emerged was troubling. My parents weren't as financially stable as they appeared. That $120,000 gift to Eileen hadn't come from surplus wealth. It had come from leveraging everything they owned. They were house rich and cash poor, living on borrowed money and borrowed time. That's when the idea hit me. I called my friend Peggy Jones the next morning. Peggy and I had gone through nursing school together, but she'd switched careers 5 years ago to become a mortgage broker. She specialized in investment properties and distressed debt situations. "Peggy, I need to ask you something, and it's going to sound crazy," I said after we'd caught up on small talk. "Lay it on me. You know I love crazy. Is it possible for an individual to buy someone else's mortgage from a bank?" There was a pause. "You mean, like, purchase the debt and become the lender?" "Exactly. It's not common, but yes, it happens. Banks sometimes sell mortgages to private investors, especially if the borrowers are having payment issues." "Why are you asking?" I took a deep breath. "It's my parents' mortgage. I want to buy it." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Bernice," Peggy finally said, "that's actually brilliant and slightly terrifying. What's going on?" I gave her the abbreviated version. The lifetime of favoritism, the $400,000 disparity, the recent $120,000 gift to Eileen while I was denied $15,000. Holy shit, Peggy whispered. Your parents gave your sister $400,000 and told you to be independent? $442,400 to be exact. Jesus. Okay, so you want to buy their mortgage as what, revenge? I want to buy their mortgage as a business transaction. They taught me to be independent. Time to show them what that really means. Peggy was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her brain working. Their bank would need a reason to sell. Are they behind on payments? 3 times in the past year. That could work. Banks don't like risky borrowers, especially older ones approaching retirement. If you came in with cash, offering to buy the full balance at a slight discount, they might jump at it. My heart started pounding. How much cash are we talking about? Well, they owe $182,000. You'd probably need to offer around $170,000 to make it attractive to the bank, plus closing costs, legal fees, maybe $200,000 total. $200,000. I did the math in my head. My savings account had $85,000. My retirement account had $130,000. My investment portfolio had another $45,000. If I liquidated everything, I could just barely make it work. Peggy, if I did this, what would happen to my parents? They'd get a notice that their mortgage had been sold to a new lender, you. They'd start making their monthly payments to you instead of the bank. You'd have all the same rights as any mortgage holder, including the right to foreclose if they stopped paying. The word foreclose sent a chill through me. I wasn't trying to make my parents homeless. I was trying to make a point. But I could also modify the terms, right? Change the payment amount, the interest rate. Absolutely, you'd own the debt. You could structure it however you wanted. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept running through the possibilities, the implications, the potential consequences. This wasn't just about money. This was about power dynamics that had controlled my entire life. For 32 years, my parents had held all the cards. They decided who deserved support and who needed to be independent. They controlled the narrative about their daughter's worth and potential, but if I owned their mortgage, the power dynamic would shift completely. Suddenly, I'd be the one with leverage. I'd be the one making decisions about their financial future. The irony was perfect. They'd spent decades teaching me that I couldn't depend on them. Now they'd have to depend on me. I spent the next week researching everything I could about mortgage purchases, debt collection, and real estate law. I consulted with 2 different attorneys to make sure everything I was planning was completely legal. I reviewed my finances with a fine-tooth comb, calculating exactly how much I'd need to liquidate to make this work. The numbers were tight but doable. I'd have to cash out my entire retirement account, which would cost me penalties and taxes. I'd have to sell all my investments at current market value, which wasn't ideal. I'd essentially be betting my entire financial future on this one move. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. This was me finally claiming the power that had been denied to me my entire life. I called Peggy back on Friday. I want to do it, I said without preamble. Are you sure? This is a big step, Bernice. There's no going back once you start this process. I'm sure. They taught me to be independent. They taught me that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. They taught me that strength means standing on your own 2 feet. And now you're going to teach them the same lesson. Exactly. Peggy walked me through the process. First, I'd need to approach the bank with a formal offer to purchase the mortgage. Given my parents' recent payment issues, the bank would likely be receptive. Then there would be paperwork, legal reviews, and finally the transfer of ownership. The whole process should take about 3 weeks, Peggy explained. Are you prepared for how your family is going to react when they find out? I thought about that $120,000 transfer. I thought about 32 years of being told I was too strong to need help. I thought about $442,000 in gifts I'd never received. Let me worry about my family, I said. 3 weeks later, I held the papers that would make me my parents' landlord. All I had to do was sign them. What would you do in this situation? Would you go through with it? Let me know in the comments below. I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning at 10:15 a.m. in the conference room of First National Bank. My hand was steady as I wrote my name across the bottom of each document, officially transferring ownership of my parents' mortgage from the bank to me. The bank manager, Richard Drexler, seemed almost relieved to be getting the loan off their books. "Your parents have been challenging borrowers lately," he admitted as he notarized the final documents. 3 late payments in 12 months, and at their age, we were starting to worry about their ability to maintain the loan long term. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I understand completely. Family obligations, you know. What Richard didn't know was that I'd spent the previous night liquidating my entire financial life. My retirement account drained, my investment portfolio sold, my savings account emptied, $203,000 transferred to my checking account to cover the mortgage purchase and all associated fees. I was now officially broke, except for the fact that I owned a $182,000 debt secured by my childhood home. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had spent my entire life teaching me about financial responsibility while making increasingly irresponsible decisions with their own money. Now their financial future was literally in my hands. "The borrowers will receive official notification within 48 hours, Richard explained, handing me a thick folder of documents. "All future payments should be made directly to you, and you'll need to provide them with payment instructions and your contact information." I thanked him and walked out of the bank, feeling like I was floating. After 32 years of being powerless in my family dynamic, I finally held all the cards. But first, I needed to set up the infrastructure for my new role as a mortgage lender. I opened a separate business checking account specifically for the mortgage payments. I researched property management software to track payments and generate statements. I even had business cards printed, Bernice Childers Private Lending Services. The certified letter went out Wednesday morning. I'd crafted it carefully with help from my attorney, making sure every word was professional and legally sound. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, please be advised that your mortgage loan, account DE4847291, has been purchased by Bernice Childers Private Lending Services. Effective immediately, all future payments should be made to the address listed below. Your loan terms remain unchanged at this time. Please contact our office within 10 business days to establish your new payment method and schedule. Sincerely, Bernice Childers, mortgage holder." I paid extra for delivery confirmation and signature required. I wanted to know exactly when they received it. The notification was delivered Thursday at 2:37 p.m. I know because I was tracking the package obsessively, refreshing the Postal Service website every few minutes. My phone started ringing at 2:45 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. By 3 p.m., I had 7 missed calls from my father and 4 from my mother. The voicemails were increasingly frantic. "Bernice, call me back immediately. There's been some kind of mistake with our mortgage." "Honey, please call. We got this crazy letter saying you own our house loan. That can't be right." "Bernice, this isn't funny. Call us back right now." I waited until evening to return their calls. I wanted them to sit with the reality for a few hours, to really understand that their financial security was no longer guaranteed. My father answered on the first ring. "Bernice, what the hell is going on? We got this letter saying you bought our mortgage. That's impossible, right? Tell me that's impossible." His voice was shaking. I'd never heard my father sound scared before. "It's not impossible, Dad. It's actually quite common. Banks sell mortgages to private investors all the time." But you're our daughter. You can't own our mortgage. That doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense. You taught me to be independent, remember? I'm just following your advice." There was a long silence. I could hear my mother in the background asking what I was saying. "Bernice," my father said slowly, "what have you done? How could you do this to us?" "I learned from the best. I'm just being independent like you taught me. This is insane. You can't be serious. You're our daughter. And you're my parents. That didn't stop you from refusing to help me when I needed it." I heard my mother grab the phone. "Bernice, sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening. Why would you buy our mortgage? That doesn't make any sense." "It makes perfect sense, Mom. You had $442,000 to give to Eileen over the years, but I was too dependent for asking for $15,000, so I decided to become truly independent. Independent enough to be your mortgage holder." The silence that followed was deafening. "400? What are you talking about?" my mother stammered. "I did the math, Mom. Every gift, every payment, every financial advantage you gave Eileen while telling me to figure things out on my own. It adds up to $442,400. That's not... We never... I have spreadsheets. I have receipts. I have bank records. Should I email them to you?" My father took the phone back. "Bernice, even if that's true, you can't just buy our mortgage. That's not how families work." "Really? Because for 32 years, you've shown me exactly how our family works. Eileen gets support and I get lectures about independence. Well, congratulations. Your lessons worked. I'm independent enough to own your debt." The call ended with my father hanging up on me. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with text messages. From my mother, "Please call us back. We need to talk about this." From my father, "This is not how we raised you." And then, 20 minutes later, from Eileen, "What the hell did you do?" I'd been wondering when Eileen would get involved. Apparently, my parents had called their favorite daughter for help. Eileen's call came at 9 p.m. "Bernice, Mom and Dad are freaking out. They said you bought their mortgage. What does that even mean?" "It means exactly what it sounds like, Eileen. I own the loan on their house now. They make their mortgage payments to me." "But why would you do that? That's so weird." I almost laughed. Of course, Eileen would think it was weird. She'd never had to think strategically about money because it had always been handed to her. "I did it because I finally got tired of being treated like the family ATM while you got treated like the family princess." "What are you talking about? You're not the family ATM." "Really? When's the last time Mom and Dad asked you for money?" "They don't ask me for money because I don't have any money." "Right. Because they give you money. They gave you $120,000 for your house down payment, Eileen." Silence. "How do you know about that?" "I saw the bank transfer on Dad's phone. $120,000. House down payment. Our gift." "Ring any bells?" That's different. I needed help with a house." "I needed help too. I asked for $15,000. They told me I was too dependent." "But you have a good job. You don't need help like I do." And there it was. The family mythology in all its glory. Eileen needed help. I didn't. Eileen deserved support. I deserved independence. You're 28 years old, Eileen. When exactly are you planning to stop needing help? This isn't about me. This is about you doing something crazy to Mom and Dad. This is about me finally standing up for myself after 32 years of being invisible. You're not invisible. You're the strong one. Being strong doesn't mean I deserve less love, Eileen. That seemed to hit her differently. Her voice got quieter. Is that what you think? That we love you less? I think you take me for granted. All of you. And I'm done with it. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My parents had apparently spent the night calling every relative they could think of, trying to get someone to talk sense into me. My Aunt Peggy had texted, "Your mother called crying. What's going on?" My Uncle Todd had left a voicemail. "Bernice, I don't know what's happening, but your parents are really upset. Call me." Even my cousin Larry had reached out. Heard there's some family drama. You okay?" But the message that really got my attention was from my father, sent at 3 a.m. "We need to meet, all of us. This has gone too far." I texted back, "I agree. Sunday dinner, like always. I'll bring the mortgage documents." The family emergency meeting was set. After 32 years of being the responsible daughter who never caused problems, I was about to become the center of the biggest family crisis we'd ever had. And for the first time in my life, I was the one with all the power. The family warfare began in earnest Friday morning. I woke up to a group text message that I apparently hadn't been included in initially, but my cousin Larry had accidentally added me when he meant to add someone else. The thread was titled "Bernice Situation" and had been active since Thursday night. My Aunt Peggy. Johnny called me sobbing. Bernice bought their mortgage? How is that even legal? My Uncle Richard. It's legal, but it's vindictive. Someone needs to talk sense into her. My cousin Derek. What's the full story here? This seems extreme even for family drama. My mother. She's trying to control us. She's angry about something and she's taking it out on us financially. My father. We raised her better than this. I don't know what's gotten into her. Eileen. She's jealous about my house. She thinks we got too much help or something. I screenshot the entire conversation before anyone realized I could see it. The narrative they were spinning was fascinating. I was vindictive, controlling, jealous. There was no mention of the $442,000 in gifts to Eileen, no acknowledgement of the $15,000 loan request they'd denied. I was simply a daughter who'd gone rogue for mysterious reasons. My phone started ringing before I'd even finished my morning coffee. "Bernice, honey, it's Aunt Peggy. Your mother called me crying last night saying you're trying to make them homeless. What's going on?" I'd always liked Aunt Peggy. She was my mother's older sister, practical and straightforward. But apparently, she'd only heard one side of the story. "I'm not trying to make anyone homeless." "Aunt Peggy, I bought their mortgage as a business transaction." "But why would you do that to your own parents? They're scared, honey. They don't understand what you're trying to accomplish." "What did my mother tell you about why I did this?" "She said you were angry about them helping Eileen with her house and you decided to get revenge." "Did she mention that they gave Eileen $120,000 while refusing to loan me $15,000? Silence. "Did she mention that over the past 15 years, they've given Eileen over $400,000 in gifts while giving me nothing? 400,000? That can't be right. I have the receipts, Aunt Peggy. Every gift, every payment, every advantage. Would you like me to send you the spreadsheet? I don't know what to say. Even if that's true, buying their mortgage seems like such an extreme response. What would you suggest instead? Asking nicely for equal treatment? I tried that for 32 years. The conversation ended awkwardly, but I could tell I'd planted seeds of doubt. Aunt Peggy was too smart to ignore numbers like that. Uncle Richard called next. He was less diplomatic. "Bernice, what the hell do you think you're doing? Your parents are good people. They don't deserve this kind of treatment from their own daughter." "Uncle Richard, did you know that my parents paid for Eileen's entire college education while I took out student loans?" "That's not the point. The point is you're holding their house hostage. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm collecting mortgage payments just like any other lender." "You're family, not a bank." Funny. They didn't seem to remember we were family when I asked for help buying my own house. "You're being petty." "I'm being independent. Isn't that what they always wanted?" Uncle Richard hung up on me, but not before muttering something about ungrateful children. The calls continued throughout the day. Cousins, family friends, even my parents' neighbors had apparently been recruited to talk sense into me. The story they were all hearing was the same. I was a vindictive daughter who'd snapped over some imagined slight and was now terrorizing my poor, innocent parents. But then something interesting happened. My cousin Derek called around dinner time. Derek was Uncle Richard's son, about my age, and we'd always gotten along well at family gatherings. Bernice, I've been hearing some wild stories about you buying your parents' mortgage. I'm sure you have. What's your version of events? Well, according to the family group chat, you've lost your mind and decided to financially abuse your parents because you're jealous of Eileen. And what do you think? Derek was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I've been waiting years for someone to call out the favoritism in your family. I nearly dropped the phone. What? Come on, Bernice, everyone's noticed it. The way your parents treat you versus how they treat Eileen. It's been obvious since we were kids. Then why didn't anyone ever say anything? Because it wasn't our business. But if you're telling people they gave Eileen $400,000 over the years, that actually makes sense. I always wondered how she afforded her lifestyle on a part-time boutique salary. You believe me? I believe you because I've watched it happen. Remember Eileen's art school graduation? Your parents flew the whole family out to California for a week-long celebration. When you graduated nursing school, we had cake at Sunday dinner. The relief I felt was overwhelming. Someone had been paying attention. Someone had noticed. Derek, I need you to know I'm not trying to hurt them. I'm trying to get their attention. I get it. And honestly, it's about time someone stood up to them. That conversation gave me strength for what came next. Saturday morning, my mother called in tears. Bernice, I'm in the emergency room. I had chest pains all night. The stress of this situation is literally killing me. My heart stopped. Mom, are you okay? Which hospital? St. Mary's. The doctor says it's stress-related, but they want to run more tests. Bernice, please, you have to stop this. You're going to give me a heart attack. I drove to the hospital immediately, my mind racing with guilt and fear. Had I pushed too far? Was my need for justice worth risking my mother's health? I found her in the emergency room, looking pale and fragile in a hospital gown. My father was beside her, holding her hand and glaring at me when I walked in. Are you happy now? He whispered harshly. Look what you've done to your mother. But something felt off. My mother's color was good, her breathing was normal, and she seemed more upset than physically distressed. I asked to speak with her doctor. Your mother came in with chest pain and anxiety, Dr. Martinez explained. Her EKG is normal. Her blood work is normal, and her vital signs are stable. We're keeping her for observation, but this appears to be a panic attack rather than a cardiac event. So she's not having a heart attack? No, she's having a stress response, which is understandable given what she's told us about family conflict, but her heart is fine. I felt a mix of relief and suspicion. A panic attack was serious, but it wasn't the life-threatening emergency my mother had implied. When I returned to her room, she was on the phone with Eileen, speaking in a weak, trembling voice about how the stress was too much for her heart to handle. That's when I realized what was happening. This was emotional manipulation, pure and simple. My mother was using a panic attack to guilt me into backing down. Mom, I said after she hung up, I'm glad you're okay. But I'm not changing my mind about the mortgage. How can you be so heartless? I'm in the hospital because of what you did. You're in the hospital because you had a panic attack. That's treatable. What I've been dealing with for 32 years isn't. My father stood up, his face red with anger. That's enough. You're going to kill your mother with this vindictive nonsense. Dad, the doctor said she's fine. This is a stress response, not a heart attack. Stress that you caused. Stress that 32 years of family dysfunction caused. I'm just the one who finally said something about it. The argument escalated until a nurse asked us to keep our voices down. I left the hospital feeling emotionally drained but more determined than ever. Sunday brought the family meeting I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. But first, I got a text from my cousin Derek. Talk to my dad about the favoritism thing. He admitted he's noticed it too, but didn't want to get involved. You're not crazy, Bernice. Stand your ground. Then, unexpectedly, I got a call from my Uncle Todd, my father's younger brother. Bernice, I heard about what's happening with your parents' mortgage. I braced myself for another lecture about family loyalty. I want you to know that I think it's about time someone called them out on their bullshit. I nearly dropped the phone. Uncle Todd, I've watched them spoil Eileen rotten while expecting you to be the perfect, self-sufficient daughter. It's been going on for years, and it's not fair. Your parents are good people, but they've got a massive blind spot when it comes to how they treat their daughters. Thank you for saying that. I was starting to think I was going crazy. You're not crazy. You're finally standing up for yourself. Just try not to destroy the family in the process, okay? As I prepared for Sunday dinner, I realized the family wasn't as united against me as they'd initially appeared. Some people had been paying attention. Some people had noticed the favoritism. And some people thought it was about time I did something about it. The real confrontation was still ahead, but I wasn't going into it alone anymore. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had never felt like a battlefield before, but as I walked up the familiar front steps carrying a manila folder full of evidence, I knew this meal would change everything forever. Everyone was already there when I arrived. My parents sat at their usual spots at the dining room table, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen them. Eileen was across from them, her arms crossed defensively. The tension in the room was suffocating. "Thank you all for coming," I said, taking my usual seat. "I know this has been a difficult week for everyone." "Difficult?" my father snapped. "You bought our mortgage, Bernice. You're holding our home hostage. That goes beyond difficult." "I'm not holding anything hostage, Dad. I'm holding you accountable." I opened the manila folder and pulled out the first document, my comprehensive financial analysis, printed on official letterhead from the accounting firm I'd hired to verify my numbers. Before we discuss the mortgage, I think we need to discuss why I bought it. I slid copies of the analysis across the table to each of them. This is a complete breakdown of every financial gift, payment, and advantage given to each daughter in this family over the past 15 years. My mother picked up her copy with shaking hands. "Bernice, we don't need to." "Yes, we do need to. Because apparently none of you understand the scope of what's been happening here." I stood up, feeling more confident than I had in years. Eileen's Sweet 16 party, $8,000. Mine, $0. Just a family dinner. "That's not," Eileen started. "I'm not finished." My voice was steady, authoritative. "College tuition, $180,000 for Eileen's private art school, $0 for my state university education." My father was staring at the paper, his face growing pale. "Monthly allowances during college, $38,400 total for Eileen, $0 for me while I work 25 hours a week." "We helped you in other ways," my mother whispered. "What ways? Please enlighten me." I pulled out another document. "Art boutique startup funding, $50,000 for Eileen, business support for me, $0. The room was completely silent except for the sound of papers rustling. "Photography equipment, $5,000 for Eileen, professional development support for me, $0. I could see Eileen doing the math in her head, her expression shifting from defensive to shocked. "Car purchases, $37,000 total for Eileen's vehicles, $3,000 for my used Honda, which I'm still driving." "Bernice, please stop," my mother said, tears starting to form. "California healing trip, $4,000 for Eileen. Divorce support for me, $0 and a lecture about being strong." I pulled out the final document, the one that had taken me the most courage to include. "And finally, house down payment, $120,000 for Eileen, given in secret, $15,000 loan request from me, denied with a lecture about independence." I looked around the table at their stunned faces. The total financial investment in Eileen over 15 years, $447,400. The total financial investment in me, $3,000 for a used car. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. You gave Eileen $447,000 over 15 years, I repeated slowly. You gave me $3,000 and called me dependent for asking for help. My mother was crying now. But I wasn't finished. But the money isn't even the worst part. The worst part is the narrative you created to justify it. I pulled out printed screenshots of text messages. These are conversations between you and various family members over the years. I read from the first one. Eileen is so creative and sensitive. She needs more support than Bernice. I looked up at my mother. You wrote that, Mom. I read from another. Bernice is the strong one. She doesn't need help like Eileen does. I looked at my father. That's you, Dad. We didn't mean, my father started. You didn't mean what? To treat your daughters completely differently. To invest in one daughter's dreams while telling the other daughter to be independent. Eileen finally spoke up, her voice small. I didn't know it was that much money. But you knew it was happening, didn't you? You knew you were getting help that I wasn't getting. She nodded reluctantly. And you never questioned it? Never wondered why I was working multiple jobs while you got monthly allowances? Never thought it was unfair that I took out student loans while your tuition was paid in full? I thought you wanted to be independent. I didn't want to be independent, Eileen. I was forced to be independent. There's a difference. I turned back to my parents. For 32 years, you've treated me like I was less deserving of love, support, and investment than my sister. You created a family dynamic where my strength was used as justification for my neglect. That's not true, my mother protested. We love you both equally. Love isn't just a feeling, Mom. Love is action. Love is investment. Love is showing up when someone needs help. I gestured to the papers scattered across the table. These numbers don't lie. Your actions show exactly how much you value each of your daughters. My father was staring at the financial breakdown, his face ashen. We didn't realize it was that much. You didn't want to realize it, because realizing it would mean admitting that you've been fundamentally unfair to one of your children for her entire life. So what do you want from us? Eileen asked. What's this mortgage thing supposed to accomplish? I sat back down, feeling the weight of the moment. I want acknowledgement. I want you to admit that you've treated me unfairly. I want you to understand that being strong doesn't mean I deserve less love and support. And then what? My father asked. You'll sell the mortgage back to the bank? Then we'll discuss terms. But first, I need to hear you say it. I need to hear you admit that you've been unfair to me. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see them struggling, their entire narrative about their family crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We have been unfair to you. Say it louder, Mom. I need to hear you say it clearly. We have been unfair to you, Bernice. We gave Eileen advantages that we didn't give you, and that wasn't right. My father nodded slowly. We told ourselves we were helping Eileen because she needed it more, but we were really we were playing favorites, and that's not what good parents do. Eileen was crying now, too. I'm sorry, Bernice. I never realized how much you were sacrificing while I was getting everything handed to me. I should have noticed. I should have said something. I felt a weight lifting from my chest that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Thank you. That's all I wanted. Acknowledgement. So what happens now? My father asked. I pulled out one final document. These are my terms for resolving the mortgage situation. First, you'll enter family counseling with a therapist who specializes in family dynamics and favoritism. All of us together. They nodded. Second, any future financial gifts to either daughter will be equal. If you give Eileen money, you give me the same amount. If you give me money, you give Eileen the same amount. That's fair, my mother said. Third, Eileen will sell her house and use the proceeds to pay me back the $120,000 you gave her for the down payment. That money will go toward equalizing the lifetime disparity between us. Eileen's eyes widened. Sell my house? You can buy a smaller house with the remaining equity, but the $120,000 that should have been available to both of us will be returned to the family pool. And if we agree to all of this, my father asked, then I'll transfer the mortgage back to a traditional lender at favorable terms. You'll never have to make another payment to me. I looked around the table at my family, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. I didn't buy your mortgage to hurt you. I bought it to save us, to save this family from a dynamic that was destroying me and enabling Eileen. We understand, my mother said, and we're sorry. We're so sorry. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was acknowledgement, and it was a start. Have you ever had to confront family about unfair treatment? How did it go? Share your story in the comments. You're not alone. 6 months later, I sat in Dr. Sarah Chen's office for what would be our final family therapy session. The same 4 people who had gathered around that dining room table in crisis were now sitting in a circle. But everything had changed. Eileen had listed her house within 2 weeks of our confrontation. The sale closed last month, and she handed me a check for $120,000 without complaint. She'd used the remaining equity to buy a modest 2-bedroom townhouse that she could actually afford on her part-time income. I never realized how much anxiety I had about money until I started living within my actual means. Eileen said during our session, I was always worried about the next crisis, the next time I'd need to ask for help. Now I know exactly what I can afford, and it's actually freeing. My parents had entered therapy immediately, both individual and family sessions. The change in them was remarkable. I see now that we failed both our daughters, my father said, his voice heavy with regret. We spoiled one and neglected the other. We thought we were helping Eileen by giving her everything, but we were actually preventing her from developing independence. And we thought we were making Bernice stronger by withholding support, but we were actually making her feel unloved. My mother nodded, tears in her eyes. We created a dynamic where both of our daughters suffered. Eileen never learned to stand on her own, and Bernice never felt like she could depend on us. The mortgage had been transferred back to a traditional lender within a month of our family meeting. My parents qualified for better terms than their original loan, and their monthly payments actually decreased. The crisis that had seemed so overwhelming turned out to be manageable once everyone stopped panicking. But the real transformation was in our relationships. I never realized how much you sacrificed, Bernice, Eileen said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I'm sorry it took something this dramatic for me to see it. I'm sorry too, I replied. I should have spoken up years ago instead of letting the resentment build. Dr. Chen smiled at us. What I'm seeing here is a family that's learned to communicate honestly about difficult topics. You've established new patterns based on equality and mutual respect. The new family financial agreement was simple. Any gift over $500 to one daughter required an equal gift to the other. My parents had already started implementing it, giving us each $2,000 for Christmas instead of their usual pattern of lavishing gifts on Eileen while giving me something practical. It feels weird getting money from them, I admitted to Dr. Chen. I'm so used to being independent. Independence doesn't mean you can't accept help when it's offered fairly, she replied. It means you have the strength to stand up for yourself when you're being treated unfairly. As we left the therapy office for the last time, my father pulled me aside. Bernice, I want you to know that buying our mortgage was the best thing you could have done for this family. It forced us to confront problems we'd been ignoring for decades. I'm just glad we found our way through it, Dad. So am I, and I'm proud of you for having the courage to fight for yourself. That took real strength. Walking to my car, I reflected on how much had changed. I'd used my life savings to buy my parents' mortgage, but I'd gained something invaluable in return, a family that finally saw me as an equal. The house I'd wanted to buy was still on the market. With the $120,000 from Eileen and my parents' promise to match it as an equal gift, I could finally afford the down payment I'd dreamed of. But more importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to accept unacceptable treatment. Sometimes you have to be willing to risk everything to save the relationships that matter most. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary. And sometimes it takes dramatic action to break toxic patterns that have existed for decades. I'd spent 32 years being the strong daughter who didn't need anything. Now I was the strong daughter who knew she deserved everything her sister had always received: love, support, and investment in her future. And that made all the difference.